Wilson's Perspective on What Jesus Says to Public Administration by Sherry Davis, California Baptist University, History of Public Administration, February 2016. So Wilson's perspective on this article, I believe, would have been a praise. I found many similarities throughout the article that symbolize some of the movement, some of the intents that Wilson had during not only his presidency, but upon being one of the classical theorists of public administration. Following that, there was two items that I noticed in the article that, in my mind, truly embodied the essence of Christ and following your spirit, which I believe public administration is based on, and just the overall good was the self-sacrifice, and again, the loss of interpretation, no ears to hear what is being said. So in the article it mentioned the ears to hear with. So let's talk a little bit more about that and how that impacted the message that Jesus was delivering, similar to Wilson with the conception of the inception of public administration. By saying that those to whom he spoke lacked ears to hear, Jesus was implying that they failed to understand him because they worshipped idols. He did not want to say this bluntly because he did not want to offend, but this was what he intended to convey biblically knowledgeable listeners. So, same thing, similar, I believe, to Wilson, and he could relate to this, as he was embarking in a new philosophy and new ideology of public administration. And at the end result, we would like to leave the impression that good was done, that the purpose of the greater good was served. So he felt like his message wasn't heard oftentimes. Even in an article, it mentioned that the real importance of the politics administration dichotomy has to do with the normative implication. That is, the principle implied by the dichotomy is that elected officials and their direct appointees have the legal right to make policy decisions for the polity, and it is the duty of the career civil servants to carry out those policies in good faith. Thus, it is the moral obligation of the dichotomy that it is important, not its empirical content. So when I read this paragraph or this article, I read the whole article, I found it very interesting, as I definitely immediately correlated that back to ears to hear. So if we're not in tune with our spirit and we're not touched with the word, it's difficult for us to hear the message. It's difficult for us to hear the spirit. And that's where I kind of felt that this was going. He wasn't saying that this dichotomy of politics and administration is not something, it was almost a metaphor, is what he was saying. And he was lost in translation, just like Jesus. Just the ears weren't able to hear because the message was so new. It was the beginning of the classical theory on public administration. They didn't know how to interpret that information. It's kind of like you go to a foreign country and the interpreter, there's another language there. Well, it's not that the language is wrong, it's just that you don't understand that language. Over time, you will be able to begin to understand that language. So sometimes we are lost in interpretation. And even when you understand the language, similar to Jesus, as they were praising the false gods, you may not understand the word to the full extent. And sometimes it takes a little bit more than others to realize those true terms. For instance, in Wilson, first theorist for public administration, or one of the first theorists, and now the philosophy or the discipline has expanded to a modern theory of public administration. But at the end, all of them end with the greater good for the people, that we need to separate the politics from the administration and be able to move forward and still have the agenda of the people, but maintain the separation. So the public administration depends on Judeo-Christian values being held by the citizenry embodied in American political institutions and expressed in policies and law. And so, similar to here, Jesus really wasn't trying to give a message. He wanted the people to rise above the disheartening and the inappropriate behaviors, the hardships being put upon them by the Roman Empire. And so he was delivering a message. He seen something wrong. And in my mind, I never looked at it from this perspective, but he was the first public administrator. He said, we're being wrong. We need someone who will stand up for these people and do the right thing for them, regardless of race, creed, color, items of those nature. So when you look at the public administration from a biblical perspective, I'm intrigued to be able to see so many similarities in the disciplines and so many direct references or similar situations that can tie back to the discipline of public administration. So the political focus of Jesus was nothing new to Judaism. Issues of politics and government were the central to the entire Judaic tradition out of which Jesus arose. Judaism was developed as a creed specific for the purpose of achieving political liberty from totalitarian oppressors. So this just goes more into my point where he wanted a democracy. He wanted to free the people. He wanted the people to be free. And so again, this ties right back into the essence of what public administration is. So my last approach I want to touch on is the self-sacrifice, which I found this section of the article, although brief, to be the most captivating in my mind. When you look at different perspectives on religion and Christianity, it's often difficult to be able to interpret and see the similarities, but this is something that I actually could see those similarities in. So for me, Wilson was willing to sacrifice. I mean, not only did he go outside of the bounds and teach a discipline or write about a discipline that it was new, he was a founding father of the discipline. And to say that takes great courage, takes great strength, and he was under a great deal of scrutiny to do that at that time. So in my mind, these are the principles by which he was governed. He was willing to sacrifice. I mean, even in his presidency, he had a massive stroke. He ran for office again. He still stayed true and diligent to the people and to the greater good of our society. And he was a Christian man, and he was willing to make those sacrifices to ensure the well-being of our country. And similar to Jesus, what he wanted for the Jews, he wanted them to be free, not be oppressed, and wanted them to want that for themselves, not so much just to deliver the message of Christianity. So Jesus preached about the power and the glory. He advocated a loving and merciful social order, a kingdom of God to replace the authoritarian and merciless regimes of this day. Jesus may have been a prophet, but he was a prophet with political aims. So again, very similar to Wilson, where we're talking about the separation, but yet not a separation. Because when you read this passage, you see he's a political activist. He's moving forward. He wants these people to not be oppressed. He wants an opportunity for the people to rise above themselves. And that's the same thing I see in the public administration. Wilson seen some disheartening things and felt like he needed to move forward in achieving goals and success and laying down this discipline in order to protect our society. So in conclusion, public administration should seek to become less a discipline and a profession and more of a social and political movement. The end of the world, or the world to come, appears to be approaching. And I chose this quote because I felt like it says so much about what public administration means. The social, economical, identical, ethical, moral values that we live in today, and the political movement we see. We've gay marriages and legalized abortion and all these things that we have tried to separate the church from the state and the politics from the administration. But meanwhile, we've almost lost focus of our fight. Our fight is to help the oppressed. It is to help the downtrodden. Public administration should be used for the good, greater good of the people. And this article really ties it back into Christianity and how public administration was way back when Jesus was alive, and he was fighting for the people, and he was the first true public administrator. Thank you.